Welcome, everyone. At ThriveNow Education, we are dismantling the factory model of education to see the child not as a data point, but as a whole thriving human within a changing ecosystem. My name is Kimberley, and I'm mum to 3 primary age children, a teacher with over 2 decades of experience in learner-centered schools, and now co-founder at ThriveNow. Today, we're exploring our 4th pillar of the ThriveNow framework, how multimodal formative assessment can be used as a tool for genuine learning and growth rather than just a tool for judgment. So my vision as an educator has always been to move away from this kind of traditional sort of single judge model. I always talk about, how I don't like to be sort of the guardian of success. And that seems to be the way that things are set up in the kind of conventional model, where the teacher gets to decide what's okay, what's not okay. Above the teacher, it's the leadership team. Above the leadership team, it's, the government, Ofsted, DfE. And I don't think the intention was there to do that, but that's the way that it's turned out in our drive for kind of the data and data-driven approaches. So what often happens is assessment feels like a sort of a final sentence almost handed down by a teacher. And sometimes young people don't even know what that sentence is until, say, parents' evenings, and then they come home either with delighted parents or parents that are wondering what's going on and why they haven't heard about this before. So instead, what we're trying to do is liberate the teacher. I've been a teacher myself. I know it's a very difficult position to be in terms of what we're expected to do and what we know is right for the young people. So we're trying to kind of liberate the teacher there from the role of the judge so that they can become more of a mentor and a co-learner alongside the young children and young people. So we view assessment in the ThriveNow framework as a partnership. It's designed to be a warm, collaborative process of that's triangulated and co-created. So we've got these sort of 3 key areas really where young people can develop a greater understanding of where they're at in their learning. So we involve teacher and tutor feedback. We invite student self-assessment through weekly portfolios and sharing rubrics with them. And also peer, parent and expert reviews where they can get feedback from that kind of the outside perspective. In this way, we're removing the kind of high stakes stress that stifles, well, certainly from my experience, has stifled children's sort of natural curiosity. So instead of being one way highway to exam success, hopefully. This is more about looking around and developing the iterative skills of self-reflecting and growing in a much more humane and holistic way. So we're not looking for a snapshot of what they know on a Tuesday morning. We're building this holistic picture of who they are becoming. And this shifts the power back to the learner, transforming assessment into a useful learning process done with them rather than to them. And we're really, really proud of that. So how does this visionary shift look like when we step outside of the classroom and into the real world? And I think that's what we've been working really hard on, because all of these ideas are great in theory, but what does this look like actually in practice? So we believe that learning is most transformative when it's grounded in real world missions. That's where the motivation comes from. That's where the relevance comes from. So we don't just ask students to read biology from a textbook. We ask them to kind of live it and breathe it. We're very fortunate where we live, to have so much stimuli for that conversation and that curiosity. So this comes to life through, not least, through the Project Weaver that we explored last week. But today we're going to go a step further and show you how rigorous our approach to assessment is. So we've sort of created several different projects that kind of demonstrate how the learning might occur and then how the assessment might occur within that. And this particular one is Kingston's hidden ecosystem. So this is an example of what the learning experience might be and then how we develop the assessment around that. So in this mission titled Kingston's Hidden Ecosystems, the students become sort of guardians of the green, if you will, mapping sort of biodiversity, and other important elements that affect our ecosystem that, we see every day, but sometimes don't kind of acknowledge, especially for us, obviously, within London's urban corridors. And this work, as we mentioned, is directly aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This one particularly, Goal 15, Life on Land, giving their daily study a sense of sort of global relevance and how this might differ from location to location. They're answering a driving question. So where are Kingston's hidden ecosystems and how can we use data and storytelling to protect them? And I think I mentioned last week, one of the great things that brings us all together as humans is our capacity to tell stories and then relate and develop empathy with those stories, not just from human to human, but also within the natural world that supports us and enables us and sustains us to live on this planet. So this sort of mission-based approach transforms the student from a passive listener in the classroom into an active investigator and advocate, developing things like problem solving, empathy, teamwork, and all those sort of learner attributes that we discussed last week. And when we really believe that when a child or young person feels they're on a mission to protect the world, they become the hero of their own world. It kind of develops their engagement and it shifts from, is this on the test, whatever they're learning, to how is this a problem that I can solve? How can I be an active agent in my local community? And obviously then links us up to all the other amazing humans and organizations that are doing similarly. So, how do we measure the success? Like, what does that look like? What we're doing is developing a tool that reflects this sort of soulful rigor. So instead of just being a nice thing to have, it's actually tangible in terms of what the outcomes are and how the young person benefits from that. So soulful rigor, it's the intersection where sort of these high academic standards that we see in politicians constantly talking about, meet the deep character development that we all know that is important for young people, that we hear from the reports from the OECD saying, we need more than just grades. We need humans to show up in kindness and compassion and problem solving and all the things that are important in the day-to-day running of whatever role they're taking on. We also know, obviously, this is important outside of work too. So we evaluate learning through three intersecting dimensions. So dimension one is this kind of academic competence. You'll hear a lot called sort of the head, head, heart, and hand, but this is the head. But we like to see it as a more of a holistic approach in that it basically, in essence, it relates to sense making. So how learners develop understanding, how they think critically, and how they make meaning of really complex things. Because it's one thing being able to do that in subject silo, in isolation, but we want our young people to be able to use this so it's really kind of making sense of that complexity. Then dimension two is developing an ethical disposition. So this then relates to sort of becoming caring and being motivated to understand oneself and others, how learners relate to each other, how they act ethically and take responsibility within their communities and the wider world. And what you'll really see with these is how we've incorporated our four spheres of thriving, which is self, relationships, society, and planetary within these three-dimensional mastery rubrics. And so finally, within that, dimension three is something that I'm really passionate about and I've been reading up a lot about. And I think it's something that we've lost. It's certainly not something that we actively develop in more conventional settings. And this is embodied learning. So this really is developing the confidence and awareness around bodily agency, how learners take initiative, collaborate, and then translate their ideas and their understanding of themselves and others and their values into meaningful action. Thus, being connected to their whole body experiences rather than just cognitive ones. So there's a crucial insight that we share with our young people and the parents. you can have like a technically brilliant project that lacks collaborative integrity, and therefore it wouldn't necessarily achieve mastery. So, a child can be a genius in isolation, but if they could then, do it in creating a toxic team environment, can we really call this success in terms of, what we're trying to achieve, which is thriving, thriving self, thriving relationships, and thriving society. We're teaching that children that being smart is not just enough. It's, we have to be developing, becoming an ethical agent and a reliable teammate, so that, it's kind of a prerequisite for that mastery, that holistic sense of mastery. So, obviously, while I want to reassure you that while our methods are innovative, they're certainly a lot of them new. Also, our academic standards remain a core pillar of the model. I've been in education, or all of us have been in education long enough to know that there has to be, there has to be this very rigorous and thorough acknowledgement and representation of the whole of the national curriculum, as well as of all of these additional things. Our perspective is that it can just be done differently. So again, for example, in terms of sort of a snapshot of assessment in dimension one, which is the sort of the academic side of things, students engage in data and digital thinking. They aren't just digging in the dirt, they're thinking about environmental engineering, and this is then mapped against the national curriculum and also um, our our seeds of knowing and understanding and change. So they might be using clipboards to log biomat accounts and compaction levels across various sites to model and predict ecological outcomes. Which may not be that different from mainstream, but where we go the next step ahead is mastery for us means more than just that. It's more than finding kind of correct pH levels and kind of finding an end result for that. It requires choosing the best way to represent the findings. It's about explaining the uncertainties in their data, and most importantly, communicating that data ethically. It's statistical analysis, basically with a conscience. And this is then all logged in their learner portfolios, which I'll talk about a bit later. So, where are we? Sorry. So, oh, crumbs. So while sort of dimension one is more about what people know and a bit more about the national curriculum. Dimension two focuses more on how they interact. So we treat soft skills as the essential skills of the modern world. And these are the things I mentioned earlier that the OECD and really sort of international research is demonstrating are the kinds of skills that we need to be focusing on in education, especially in light of the developments with AI and how much AI can now do. These are the essential skills, and we develop them through things like kind-specific feedback checks, and sort of formally assessing how a child learns around social and emotional development. And executive functioning skills. They reflect on how they help their team, possibly, perhaps by organising soil samples to prevent site confusion. Perhaps they can demonstrate how they handled a disagreement that came about, such as sort of voting on a map layout and accepting the team's choice with integrity. And then exploring a little bit more from a bodily perspective, we'll go on to that next, but how that felt and learn next steps for learning. So it's not just recognizing, it's also celebrating these things in ourselves and in each other. We explicitly state to our students that how they work is as important as the final output. So sort of by measuring their capacity to strengthen the community, we ensure they're building the collaborative skills required both now and in their future. And then finally, that comes on to dimension three, So this sort of internal alignment leads us on to like embodied learning or somatic intelligence. And this really is about ensuring a learner's actions match their stated values. And if they don't, is that something that's been self-selected or that's something that they feel peer pressured into changing? And what does that mean? And how can we, how can we develop agency over how our body feels and how we're showing up in the world? So we might use reflection prompts like I stay grounded by to focus their breath and pacing and other things as well. So teaching children to be aware of their somatic state really does give them the tools to lead themselves and others through stress in real time. This is taught both explicitly, like practices we're incorporating, like practice like the Alexander technique, and also implicitly, like I just stated, sort of through the learning within the sessions. In this way, a young person can stay grounded and connected, and therefore they can adapt to the challenges of any mission. Absolutely, this is not immediate. This is very much something that they sort of grow and develop and are supported in and through. And we see that as a very important, one of the most essential roles as a teacher and as a learning support to help them with that. So, what do we mean by mastery? How do we track this? So, we really want to move away from this kind of pass and fail, A to F, this kind of oppositional approach of sort of formal grades. And we prefer sort of more of a developmental stages. And we also acknowledge that young people won't just reach something and stay there. They'll be going sort of backwards and forwards and inside out as these things show up in different ways. So in terms of the levels and what they mean, we've got emerging, which sort of identifies objectives. It requires significant support, and that's not seen as a bad thing. You're not failing when you're emerging. It's just an acknowledgement that I'm in a state where I need a little bit more support here in a particular area, and that's a good thing. That's a celebrated thing. And then we've got developing, which is meeting most of the rubrics, I suppose, might need some refinement or consistency, but really in there is a lot of celebration of I guess the moving forward from emerging. Then we've got secure, and this might be for a young person who consistently showing up, alongside the rubrics that have been developed. And when I talk about rubrics, remember this is not something just that teachers have developed. This is something that is the rubrics are co-developed with the young people. So this is already rubrics that they've signed up to that they agree is a good idea in terms of how they want to grow and develop. So if they're doing that securely, then they can certainly feel a sense of satisfaction that that's something that they've worked hard at, and they'll have their learner portfolios to show how that they've kind of made that journey, because they can then use that and apply it to other areas of their learning. And then we've got sort of mastering, which is when they're sort of consistently and meeting and exceeding their own expectations. They're teaching others. They've got deep understanding. Their metacognitive capacities are really advanced in this area, and these are all woven through and exemplified in their learning portfolios against each part of the curriculum, so that they can self and peer assess and they kind of know exactly what the parameters are. And I think that gives really a sense of like confidence and direction, and something that they can come back to if they ever need or want to sort of check in. So the distinction here really is vital, that mastery isn't just getting the answer right, it's about the embodied application of the learner traits under pressure. To reach mastery, a student must demonstrate that their heart, body, and head are all aligned. I have to forgive my delicious little cat for joining in. She loves it. She's the queen of embodied learning, I found. Okay, so what is this? What is this? What is this cat? What is this learning portfolio? You might hear about, lots of people are developing different things in different ways. They're making the most of the tools that are available to them, which is great. And all we're doing is designing one that sort of represents the work and the framework that we're doing at ThriveNow. So they share evidence of what they're learning through these portfolios, and they're both physical and digital, so they can work in a way that suits them. We don't, we're trying to obviously make the best of AI and tech that we've got, but equally, we need young people to be having breaks away from screens. So there will also be a good amount that's the kind of the physical, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about the exhibitions that we'll be exploring with the local community in a slide or two. So this is about not just about the outcomes, it's about the journey. So it's not just saying I've done this, it's saying what did I learn through the journey. We're also developing currently some tracker documents for teachers to share what they have taught from one perspective to ensure total curriculum coverage and transparency with parents, but also what the young people have learnt and how they have applied this to their lives and endeavours. So this isn't just about what teachers teach, it's what young people learn. And that I think really sets us apart from what you'd expect from the kind of more conventional settings. In this way, they're not only prepared for exams, but the reality of using what they learn formatively in multimodal ways, so lots of different ways, iteratively and with increasing confidence. And I think they'll find that this really is, whatever they choose to do next, whether they go straight into work, whether they do more studying, whether they become an entrepreneur, these really are the skills, these self-assessment skills and team assessment skills that they will use day to day. So one thing I haven't quite touched upon yet is our wellbeing compass. Was it like an index? We want to make sure that we're intentionally attending to children and young people's well-being. It's actually something that's evolved from my own journey this last 2 years, in making sure that we're living from our values and how to communicate those to others respectfully. Because it's all well and good to know our own values and to live by them, but what happens if our values don't match other people's? So it's and what are our boundaries and how do we say no to no, so that our boundaries are respected? And I think that's particularly relevant. I found it's relevant for everybody, but I've noticed more with neurodiverse learners that they're much more aware of their boundaries and they're much less open to having them restricted. And that's when we have things, young people not wanting to go to school because they're not being, heard and respected in the way that they should be. So emotional health, we know, like really is the foundation of this. So what our Wellbeing Compass does is provide a shared language for students to articulate their kind of inner climate. And this is not just textually, it's also visually. We're working with, I've mentioned them before, the Nova Scene, a phenomenal group of humans, curated or supported by Kirsten Stevens, and she's co-creating these things called glyphons, and they're ways for people to communicate beyond just text. And this is really innovative, really important stuff. So we're really excited about what's being developed there, and we'll certainly be incorporating that into our learning as well, our learning environment. So we'll also be doing through the Wellbeing Compass body and emotional check-ins, so students can build their emotional literacy, and this obviously then enables them to access the high-level cognitive work. They can learn to tell us how they're feeling, developing their sense of purpose and informing their choices. And this really is what puts the soul in the soulful rigor. It's never an afterthought. It's kind of designed in. So I mentioned earlier something called exhibitions. So this is really kind of getting how does the work extend beyond just classrooms, just beyond ourselves and our community. So we're really bringing these exhibitions into the broader community, and what that might look like is it could be like, for example, the project that we used earlier. It could be like a hidden ecosystems expo. This isn't a test; it's just a way to celebrate their work. It's a way to invite specialists in their fields to come in and give feedback. The expositions don't always happen at the end. Quite often, they happen in the middle because the feedback that they get then informs the next cycle of learning. It's also a really great way where kind of teams can celebrate and share the developing confidence And sort of, I mean, for this, it might be an interdependence web. They might be able to suggest things that they want to make changes that they may want to make to the local council. They might have like a pop-up eco theatre to try and get the community involved in looking after our environment. In very specific ways. I saw that down in Bournemouth. We went down there a little while ago, and they had a beautiful way of incorporating children and young people in terms of how and why it's important to keep the beaches clean and what impact that has not just for humans but the broader community that they're living in. It was just wonderful. So bringing all of those really good practice into what we're doing and making sure that we are talking to our local council and showing up and celebrating these glorious young people. We just, we know how exceptional they are when they put their mind to things. I think, just one final point in that. I think when young people see like a local leader or somebody they respect or a role model, making a pledge based on their research or persuasion or presentation or whatever it is, they realize their learning has actual value in the world. And my goodness, the power of that is just extraordinary. So by combining these dimensions, our students and young people develop three core roles. So they've got there's kind of these hats, these like data detective. So it's mastering systems thinking. Sorry, whole lot of talking here. Mastering systems thinking to understand how nature and human decisions interact. There's the kind of the well-being lead. So the heart and body, mastering emotional intelligence to lead with presence and regulation. And then we've got the kind of the story weaver, sort of mastering complex problems, solving using problem solving using data and sort of ethical action. So we've got all of that sort of working together to develop this soulful rigor. So when a student can inhabit all three, we feel like that's a great example of this. An example of this, what does thriving self, thriving relationships, thriving society, and thriving planet look like in real life? So they don't just pass school. It's not just like you've passed. It's like becoming grounded, it's becoming capable, and it's just becoming ready to manage themselves in this really complex world that we live in right now. So thank you for sharing your evening with us. If you are here as a parent, we are actively opening our admissions, woohoo, for our September cohort at the end of this month. We will go through that journey, what that journey will look like in the next slide. And then if you're here as a teacher or a school or an alternative provision, and you're watching this recording and you'd like to explore a consultancy package where we can help you bring this alive in your own environment, then please do email us. So for parents looking to sign up, if you haven't already, you can fill in our expression of interest form and we'll send the admissions pack for you to fill in. And once you have filled in the admissions forms, we'll invite you for a chat where you can tell us sort of your story and we can explore whether we might be a good fit. So we showed your interest through the expression of interest, you kind of discovering our approach by the prospectus. You then get to know us through these videos or lives if you're here live. The next step will be to tell us your story. The step after that is we'll have a family meeting. So we'll invite you in to discuss, what your needs are, what that might look like in the school. And then we'll invite your young person back for a learner visit if everybody feels like it's still a good fit. And then finally, there'll be an invitation to join us. And this pathway sort of goes all the way through for the next few months. And then finally, in the spring term, after Easter, we will be inviting you to sort of more formally onboarded. So we'll make sure that you and your young person and your whole family feels happy, welcome, excited. You've got all the information you need to start. There'll be opportunities to meet the rest of the cohort. So you're not just, starting something in September with fear and not knowing quite what's what. so that when you come back in September, it will be a really lovely, smooth transition. So in terms of, there's questions before about like what we're looking for, we're actively seeking families who share our inclusive and neuro-affirming ethos. We really do believe in strong collaboration. We know that that comes from both sides, from home, school, and also within our local community. And we really want to be working together to support your child to thrive. So thank you. I will stop sharing my screen now and invite anybody who wants to ask a question, they can.